Good afternoon. On the inside flap of your program, it says thank you to our community of contributors. And you can see them. Certainly, when we talk about collaboration, it is important to have a number of people who not only contribute financially, but contribute mentally to the process. And the planning committee certainly was well representative all over the region. We've asked them to stand once before. I want to acknowledge them once again for their hard work and efforts, especially St. Louis County, which really came to the fore and helped us out in a lot of different ways. So again, the Planning Committee, thank you for an awesome time that you provided us. I also want to acknowledge one special contributor, and that was someone who contributed financially, and I'm certainly excited about that because it helped pay for some folks who were on a budget to be able to be here today. One is East West Gateway Coordinating Council. Appreciate that effort. The other is Commerce Bank. Laura Gilbert is here. Laura, would you please wave or stand and be recognized? Takes a village, does it not? So now we want to hear a larger perspective around creating collaborative communities. We have the good fortune to have Yvonne Sparks here with us today. As you can see from your program, and her bio is extensive in the areas of community development, and finance. Currently, Ms. Sparks is the Assistant Vice President and Community Development Officer at the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. She is a dear friend. I think she will give you quite a bit of information from a larger perspective. Without further ado, Ms. Yvonne Sparks.
Good afternoon. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to be here today. This is an historic event. CREA has been around a long time, and this is the first time that they have done something like this. So I have to acknowledge your leadership. Charles Bryson has toiled long and hard in the city of St. Louis. And now that he is at CREA, I know that he is going to raise the profile and raise the issues that CREA addresses. So I want to thank Charles for the invitation, thank the staff of CREA for putting together this wonderful conference, and to acknowledge what I think is an outstanding planning committee, many of whom have been my colleagues for many years. So thank you all very much, and so far so good. Very, very well done. When Charles spoke with me about doing this, we talked about a lot of things, a lot of approaches. But as Chris said this morning, all of my my comments are going to be in the context and are in the context, unavoidably, of Ferguson and Michael Brown. And I have to tell you that, sorry, I always get emotional when I talk about that, that it's about time. It is about time that this community stood up and said no more. It was tragic what happened. It certainly was unfortunate that that young man's life was lost. But in all of my decades of work in community development in St. Louis, I've always wondered, why don't people get up and say something? Why don't we get up and do something? And now we are, and it brings joy to my heart. And I think all of us in this room have an obligation to do what we can to keep this activism going. Nothing changes without people being active. We heard those comments in the room from my friend Ramona. It takes time and it takes people on the ground working with people who live in isolation and segregation. You have to walk the walk with them. You have to let them know that their voice counts, and we have to find ways to get them to those hearings, to those meetings, to those convenings, so that they can participate, so that they know that they have a voice and making a difference. So that was my unofficial preamble, and I have to say that those comments and the comments that you're about to hear are mine and mine alone, and do not represent the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, the Federal Reserve System, or the Board of Governors. So, on to the formal part of my presentation. Charles and I talked about my presenting comments about comprehensive community development and fair housing, and why they must work together through community engagement. I want to say that I'm very pleased to see some of my colleagues in the room, Todd Swanstrom, David Wilson, Maddie Moore, Sal Martinez, April Ford Griffin. We have worked together for many, many years. But I am also very, very heartened to see some faces, some new voices in the choir, young people, new faces who are working and will be the leaders that we look to in the future. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, my friends. Thank you, my colleagues. And thank all of you for being here. As I said, this conference is groundbreaking, and it's special because of its timeliness. This moment in history in our community is a pivotal one, and questions of civil rights and fair treatment in community have been all of our minds for weeks. And not only on our minds, but on the hearts and minds of people across the globe. And the question is, how are we going to show up going forward? Because you can trust that if The Guardian and the BBC are reporting on this at the top of their news hour and above the fold in their newspaper, that there are others around the world doing the same. St. Louis, we have to move forward and get out of this rut that has kept us behind and falling further behind and 50 years behind the rest of the country, especially the coast. It's been 46 years since the passage of the Fair Housing Act. It's been the Housing and Community Development Act was passed in 1974. So I want to talk about how long both the Housing and Community Development Act have been at work, how we are connected. My job and community development at the Federal Reserve Bank is largely grounded in the Community Reinvestment Act that was passed in 1977. So we share a common history, and we are historically connected in as much as both of those acts came about as the result of community activism. If you don't know, the Federal Reserve Bank writes rules for the Community Reinvestment Act. We are the regulators, as are the OCC and the FDIC, in enforcing those regulations. when it comes to financial institutions at its base, financial institutions investing in the communities from which they take deposits, and then investing in them, reinvesting in them in ways that are safe and sound and mutually beneficial to the community and the bank. The Fed is also responsible for its larger mission of setting monetary policy and interest rates for the United States, and as the bank, if you will, for the U.S. Treasury. Charles also asked me to talk about some examples in the 8th Federal Reserve District, which is the St. Louis Federal Reserve. There are 12 Federal Reserve districts across the country, and each of them has a community development function. And I might add that in terms of community development resources, the Federal Reserve probably is the largest, most comprehensive source for information, events, podcasts, audiocasts, interviews, research, data sets, white papers on the issues of community development in the nation. You all have this card in your bags. I encourage you to look at the resources. If you're interested in community development at all, if you're interested in issues that are related to comprehensive community development, I urge you to take a look at that. Closer to home, you'll also have Bridges, which we produce here in St. Louis, that is about all of the states and organizations that we work with in our 7-state region. So that is the larger perspective that Charles was talking about. The St. Louis Federal Reserve District includes 2/3 of Missouri, mostly the eastern part, all of Arkansas, northern Mississippi. We work hard in the Delta, western Tennessee, western Kentucky, eastern Indiana, and southern Illinois. We have some of the most difficult and challenged parts of the nation, and we work constantly with our staff in St. Louis, in Louisville, in Memphis, and Little Rock to reach all of those people. We work in rural areas, we work in urban areas. We have partners in the Delta, we have partners in all of Tennessee. We partner with the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland and of Atlanta. So that is our larger perspective, and later in my remarks, I will give you some examples. I'll also talk to you about a definition of community development, because community development means different things to different people when they hear it. So just for purposes of this talk, I want to start with a shared definition. So I've chosen to kind of marry parts of the definition of community development established by HUD and what we use at the Fed community development function. Together, these two parts of these definitions create the what and the how of community development that our two organizations, HUD and the Federal Reserve Bank, employ. As for the what, HUD defines community development in part as activities that build stronger and more resilient communities through an ongoing process of identifying and addressing needs, assets, and priority investments, including infrastructure, economic development projects, public facilities, community centers, housing, public services, micro enterprise, code enforcement, and homeowner assistance. That's a pretty comprehensive list and gets pretty close to what a comprehensive, holistic approach to community development entails. At the Fed, we explore ways to access the public and private financial and human resources that can support the establishment of those things that HUD is focused on and funds. So what we do is convene stakeholders. And by stakeholders, we mean practitioners, financial institutions, community development corporations, government agencies, and the philanthropic community. We are now engaged in a national effort with national philanthropies to get them engaged in funding the communities that they serve. We think they have been absent from this work, and we believe there should be more than the Ford and Rockefeller foundations engaged in community development. So we convened stakeholders, and we try, and we do, because we are the Fed, there are some benefits. We are able to attract the best minds, the thought leaders, the doers of innovative community development, and bring those people, those voices, those practices directly to the people in our district through conferences, meetings, video conferences, and webinars. We conduct research, and we share it with policymakers and practitioners. We pride ourselves on being an objective and trusted sharer of broker of information, an objective analysis of the economic challenges facing low-income communities and the attendant policy and program implications. We identify emerging issues by gathering and analyzing current information on economic and financial conditions, and identify emerging issues in low and moderate income communities. I want to say that, too, as we go through this, when I say low and moderate income communities, that is not a proxy for saying minority communities. Sometimes we find that when we say low and moderate income or low income, some people have in their minds that that means people of color only. But trust, in our district, in rural areas and small towns and cities, poverty knows no color. Low and moderate income people are isolated and segregated by race, by class, by income, by perception, no matter where they are and what color they are. For example, in Memphis, when our examiners examine banks, we look for patterns of discrimination, and I can tell you, in that metropolitan area and in others, we are finding discrimination against Asian populations that are migrating into some of these areas. Popular media would have you believe that Asian populations are superior to us in terms of income and educational attainment. But Asia is a large place, and there are refugees who are coming here and living in poverty. So let us not make the mistake of using low and moderate income as a proxy for people of color because, again, poverty knows no color. Our work, I talked about comprehensive community development. That means that our work as a function throughout the Federal Reserve System and in St. Louis means that we work on issues not only of affordable housing, which is what has dominated the community development field for the last 20 years with the emergence of tax credit financing and the Hope 6 program. We began to view community development as only the production of affordable housing. We left out the community part. The funding was going to rooftops and not to the people under those rooftops, not to creating the amenities and recreational facilities that are necessary for a whole community. We have affordable housing being built in food deserts. We have affordable housing being built with no access to transportation. Holistic community development pays attention to all of that, in addition to household financial stability, income inequality, the accumulation of assets, the disparities that follow poverty have been identified now. And what we do at the Fed, I talked about research, I talked about data. We have to begin to do our work that we've done for the last 50 years, and some of the people in this room and I have been doing this work for a very long time, and we've done it out of feeling a need to make change. But now, as Dr. Swanstrom, Ms. Rich, Dr. Metzger showed us, we've got to make data-driven cases to support our proposals for change. What we are looking at now, and the research, particularly by Raj Chetty at Harvard, and others cited in a book that I encourage you all to look at called What Works, that is published by the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, is a comprehensive look at what works in community development in American cities. Our research at our Center for Household Financial Stability and in our regional economist work, we are finding that indicators of disparity are the new proxies for fairness and equity. It's not just that discrete instance that we find in testing and in the good work that the Equal Housing Alliance does, but it's a much broader context that we have to look at when we talk about fairness. When we look at poverty, when we look at segregation, we find very distinct patterns of disparities of substandard housing, poor education and job preparation, income and wealth inequality, lack of social capital, that is the ability to move beyond that neighborhood, that block, that housing complex, and make the case for your own needs, to be able to interact with others that are not in your same situation, having the capital and the self-efficacy to speak your mind on your own behalf, and lack of civic engagement, lack of accessible job opportunities, and we saw that in Elizabeth's mapping of where the housing is and where the jobs are and the gap in the transportation to connect the two. And then we have a lack of small business creation and support to support local jobs that are accessible. And despite some people's belief, this is not just a result of people's choice to live with people like them, because it happens in upper class communities as well. Again, we're talking about class and race, and some upper income African Americans and people of color choose to live in communities with people of similar conditions and position. So it's not simply a result of choice, but it is a condition and a result of public policy. We heard that all morning. Public policy that has created these conditions. And it's not just federal policy, it's local policy, it's state policy, and it is also the reactions of the private sector. Realtors steering people to certain communities. That still goes on. Steering immigrants to certain communities. That still goes on. There is a lot of housing stock, sound housing stock, with 3 and 4 bedrooms in North St. Louis. Perhaps we should consider North St. Louis as a resource for resettlement of refugees and immigrants to revitalize those parts of the community that are substantially sustainable, intact, and safe. They do exist. We can do this. We can do this. The mayor, the city has made it their business to say that immigration and refugees are going to be part of our revitalization strategy. Well, it needs to be part of the revitalization strategy of the entire city, of entrepreneurship, of housing rehabilitation, and repopulation in those areas. Finally, Charles asked me to present a couple of examples of communities that have fought the good fight, fought through some tremendous barriers. There are bruises, there was blood on the floor, it took a long time, but they fought the fight and they won for their entire community. Louisville is now part of the county. It was in the same state that we are. It was separate from its county. But about 20 years ago, they began the process of becoming a whole region and looking at Louisville as the center of the region and rejoining the county and making sense of their governments in the surrounding cities and relationships with those cities. What they've done in Louisville that has taken a long time and is a result of the work of the equal housing organization there is create something called Making Louisville Home for Us All. It is a 20-year plan that has engaged the mayor and all of the city departments, all of the planning agencies, and they have made a commitment to include affirmatively addressing fairness in housing and access in all of the facilities that they produce. This is, again, as we heard this morning, we have to take the long view. This is a 20-year plan, but they have created the plan, they got the funding, they did the work, and they worked with all of the agencies in the city of Louisville to create this program to affirmatively further fair housing. It can happen. In Memphis, and you know, you can say a lot of things about Memphis, but every time I go there, I am amazed at how progressive they are when it comes to community development. I am amazed at how they have worked through their issues. Memphis just this year completed the merger of the educational systems of Shelby County and the city of Memphis. That was no mean feat, let me tell you. It took work, and those are the kinds of things that we have to look forward to. What Memphis has done is created an organization called LIFT, Leveraging Investment for Transforming, for Community for Transformation. This is an organization, an intermediary that Mayor A.C. Wharton, his entire administration, every department in that city has committed to running all of their dollars through LIFT, gathering philanthropic dollars and putting them into this intermediary and supporting their efforts to raise more money. And they did this with a coalition of the city, all of their departments, 6 foundations, I believe, and the coalition of at least 25 community development corporations. They took data and looked at the community and are focusing all of these resources on 3 areas that have been designated that all of these actors came together and chose because the data did not lie. It was not about the politics. It was not about who wanted what where. It was about what the data showed. That's how they reached agreement. And they have 3 development areas that the mayor and all of their departments have determined will receive the largest amount, the lion's share of support. We must get comfortable with data because data doesn't lie. You can manipulate it, but you can also check it. And you will find that it is consistent. And I really, really encourage you to go to LIFT, Leveraging Investments for Transformation in Memphis. They have a wonderful story and they're doing tremendous work. In the practice of community development today, I'm finishing up here. I think the best speech is short and I've probably gone longer than I should have. I want to talk about just a few things before I close. When we're practicing comprehensive community development, we must do it together. We cannot separate affirmative effort for fair housing from building strong community institutions, from desegregating communities, from finding ways to put boots on the ground to work with people to get them comfortable with being engaged civically and socially in ways that are productive. That is something that has been ignored. That is something that nobody has been willing to invest in many, many years. When community development started, when movements worked, they worked because there were community organizers on the ground walking the walk with people, getting them out of their houses, helping them understand what was going on, and then making sure that they got to the meeting. We've got to figure that out. That is essential. We can't tell people what they should do and then do nothing to help them do it. Because if they leave their community and they want to do something and they take a chance, they hear something and they go back to the community, they're going back to some place with people who are no more informed than they were, who have nothing more to share with them, and who will ridicule them for having tried. That is a mindset that has to change, and we have to find a way to walk that walk with them. We have to engage youth and young adults. I mean, people, please, look at what is happening. We have children and young adults who cannot read, who have never had a job, who cannot write well enough to fill out a job application, cannot speak English well enough to go into an employer and ask for a job. What's going to happen over the next 25 or 50 years when they are adults and they are a population and all they know is segregation, isolation, and alienation? We're at a crisis point now, so I urge all of us to do our parts. And that means aligning goals of communities and neighborhoods with the larger regional goals so that you can have so that we can have support to be astute and engage the right public and private sector partners to do the work. The work that Todd is doing at UMSL is a partnership with the university, with his Des Lee professorship and what goes along with that, and the community. You have to be prepared for long-term engagement, be knowledgeable about all available tools, not just the block grant, not just the block grants, but local inclusionary zoning and philanthropy. And finally, we have to know how to advocate for equitable uses of resources, diverse leadership, and accountability for that leadership, no matter where it is. Without accountability, a promise is nothing but some words. A commitment is nothing but some words. We are responsible. If we allow things to happen, we have nobody to blame but ourselves. What we must do now, we must be comfortable with strategic community development, using data to make decisions as a guide in this new era of scarce resources and increasing needs. We cannot spread resources like peanut butter and expect to have an impact. We must work smarter together. The pie can be made bigger. We have a tendency in this city to think that, oh, I got mine, and I'm going to get it before you get yours because the pie is going to be too small for all of us. Well, it's not. If we are strategic, if we invest resources to create new resources for communities, there will be more opportunity. There will be more ways that we can engage and people can be part of expanding the pie. That's part of aligning our needs and desires with larger regional and community goals for mutual benefit. And finally, fair housing and community development are inseparable in this new age. Integrated approaches will be the most effective approaches. And we and the fair housing community are using data to be strategic and collaborative, and I hope that we continue. I want to thank you today for this opportunity. It has been my pleasure. I know I get a little bit serious, but I assure you that I have had a good time today, and I have enjoyed speaking to you, and I hope that at least some of what I have to say resonated with you, and that it will inspire you and all of us to work even harder at what we do every day. Thank you so much for your attention.
Yvonne, we wanted to give you this token of affection, of support for us and you. So this says St. Louis City of St. Louis, CREA, Fair Housing Conference 2014. It is a home, and this is for you.
Thank you so much.
I'll put it in a box.
Okay. It's so pretty.
There you go.
Thank you. Thank
Another
you
round of
very
applause,
much.
please.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. Oh, wait. He's not done.
Oh.
Wow. I'm so glad she wasn't wound up. Very quickly, this afternoon, the sessions will be moderated by, um, hmm, it's here somewhere. Hold on a second. Debbie Monterey. So, we will start at 1. We may start just a little bit later so you all can have time to get where you are going. There will not be any closing remarks by me. I will make them now. Thank you. I'm not done. Thank you for, again, coming to our first conference. I've had a couple of people ask me what's the follow-up. I'll be honest, I have no idea. But I do need you. I really do need you to fill out your evaluations. We cannot move forward. We don't know what direction this all will take without having your evaluations. I know my Board of Commissioners would love to see what the evaluations were. I would like to see them. Want to know, what are you all interested in? Whether you're in the city or in the county, that doesn't matter, because what we decided was, yes, this is a city conference with a regional flair. So we want to know not only what the city people think, but we also want to know how can we do better, what collaborations with our county brethren. So with that, I thank you all for a wonderful morning session and look forward to hearing from our speakers this afternoon. Thank you.